What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. I thought it would be a good time to do a new building update because we actually have a few new things to show you here. So look at that, we actually have working lights in here. For a little while there, we did have some degree of working lights, like at the very far end here on these posts. They had started to install these lights, but the rest of these posts were unfinished. They have all of them except this last one right here done. So this was kind of a complicated one because we needed to run this wire right here, kind of like over here, kind of hidden, and then installed right there. So that's still a work in progress, but the problem that we were having, we would have a breaker that would constantly pop. And it would pop not when you turn the lights on, it would just pop randomly. The lights would be off, everybody's working or doing whatever they're doing in here, and then suddenly that one single breaker, only that one would pop. So, had no idea why. Finally the electricians came over, and it happened while they were here. And it happened a couple times, so they were finally able to diagnose it. We have two outlets outside that are going to be obviously exterior outlets. And the problem that we were running into was that since those were also unfinished, what would eventually happen is like the wind would blow and one of the exposed tips, don't ask me why there's exposed tips on those wires, but would hit the metal siding of the building and would just arc and trip the breaker. So outside there's these two little burnt marks in the siding where that kept on happening. So that was like the first little electrical issue, but now since they got that kind of fixed, it no longer trips. The second little issue is something that we noticed inside the bathrooms here, which, by the way, I'm very happy with how the bathrooms turned out. What was going on was some of these outlets, and sorry, it's a little echoey in here, obviously it's a big blank empty room, but some of these outlets in here, like this guy in particular, there's a couple others, near the washlet, and also right up there. You see how it's that little guy there is kind of at half power? Well, it's kind of like that because it got damaged. Because the wiring in here, half of the outlets, or at least half the circuits, I should say, were running at 240 volt. So this little GFCI here was like steaming, piping hot, because it's not supposed to be running at 240. And we had to have a little bit of repair drywall work. And so what was happening was this guy's equipment would just keep frying itself. He lost several pieces of equipment just trying to do his work. And he was like telling my Finnish carpenters, like, something is the issue there. Like something's really weird. Tested it and sure enough, 240 coming out of these wall sockets. So clearly somebody wired that up wrong. And it's fixed now, but the exhaust fan in the shower is burnt out and we need to get that replaced, blah, blah, blah. We need to replace the carpenter's tools that was doing the drywall. Yeah. Another thing worth mentioning is all of this tubing here. So this is a very nice PEX brand called Uponor. It's a lot easier to work with than standard PEX that you might find. Like, so standard PEX would be like the blue and red stuff that you see up in the ceiling there, which is fine for most applications, but for like heating coils, you really want to go with this Uponor stuff, which is quite a lot more expensive. And this particular plumber went through the trouble of, instead of using 90s, he used these pieces of, I guess, like PVC and had them bent and uses those as corner guides. And it's really difficult to have to thread all of that through, all of this pipe just to get these particular 90s. And there's several of them going throughout. So for example, like way up in here, you can see, and there's some like way down there. But you get the idea. It's not exactly the easiest thing to install. But those pipes that you see on the ground there are eventually going to be heating the aquariums. right above this space, we can look up there in a moment, but right above this space is where we have all the boiler systems, all the pump controls, well, there's only the one expansion tank. And those boilers also control these heating coils here. And there's two sets of these manifolds, so that's the radiant floor heating. Right in the middle section of this building is where we're going to be having the sumps. There's going to be, if you look at these posts here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can imagine there's going to be a 4x8 sump right there. And so you see that each one has a corresponding set of heating and cooling coils. So the big coil that I showed you that was sitting on the ground, there's going to be a return and a supply for heating to each one of these areas. And then there's an additional return and supply for cold water, which is going to be supplied by our rainwater collection cistern. The rainwater collection cistern is about 55 degrees. It sits underground, and they're huge. They're like 10,000 gallons, and holds temperature very, very, very stable. All of that plumbing is going to come in from this corner here. So this cistern we're going to be using for both our RO system to make purified water, and also for that temperature control element. So over here, one day is going to have a whole bunch of pumps and whatnot. So perhaps the most striking addition to this upstairs is this new flooring. We went with LVT, which I believe stands for luxury vinyl tile. So I had this nightmare that this floor was actually going to be turning out pink. Because when I originally selected this floor color, I had selected it with the original wall color in mind. And since that point, we had chosen to go with a completely different colored wall, this kind of like this bluish gray. Yeah, in my dream, like the floor would just look completely pink. It was ridiculous. But I'm kind of glad to see that it did turn out nicely. I mean, there's a lot of brown hues, obviously, but it does pick up on some of the grayish blue that's in the walls. This is the bathroom upstairs, and it turned out really nicely. Well, it's not exactly done. So obviously, the shower areas are still missing their glass walls. But the real big thing that this whole building is missing is a working septic system. That has been a long odyssey in itself. But where should I even begin with that? Our situation with septic was kind of special. It was very difficult to get anybody on the septic side of things to show up. I mean, I think that what should have been like a couple month project turned into like a 12-month project. And it was really bizarre because the guy would just like leave equipment here, and not like little pieces of equipment. He would leave like large machinery just parked on my property, like with the keys in it, and like hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially in equipment. And they just wouldn't hang around for like a few weeks. We're talking like 3 to 4 months at a time, just sitting there doing no work. And I'm thinking like, maybe this person's just so independently wealthy that they could just do that. Maybe it's a giant septic install company, but it's never more than like 2 other guys with him. I mean, that's highly suspicious. I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything in particular, but for those of you guys that are in construction, you kind of know what I'm getting at. It's very suspicious for hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of machinery just to be hanging out on a work site, not doing anything for 4 to 6 months. So anyway, when this person finally did come to finish up a lot of the groundwork and everything like that, it was so long that since they had brought in this topsoil to finish up the work, that the topsoil had trees growing out of it, literal trees, like 5-foot tall trees, because it was probably a good 10 to 12 months since that was originally placed, and he never got to doing that work. So finally he was like, I don't think I can even use this topsoil because there's just too many weeds growing. And I'm like, yeah, dude, because you didn't do the work. Anyway, calm down, anyway. He finally did get that all done. I'm thinking, sweet, we can finally have like working bathrooms, working sinks and whatnot. Not true. So the septic system requires these electrical components. It requires 2 pumps, it requires an aeration unit, and then get a final inspection. But it's the purview of this other septic company that actually manufactures these tanks, not this guy that's been kind of dragging his feet on installing all this stuff. I'm like, okay, so I'm now waiting for a second septic company to come in here and finish this install. I give them a call, and guess what? The part that we need has been back ordered for 6 months. We just can't win when it comes to septic. It is just, come on, like thing after thing after thing. So right now we're waiting for this part to come in. Nobody has any clue when it's gonna show up. One day we'll get to enjoy these bathrooms or any other thing that has a drain on this entire building. Lastly, we have my studio space. And I guess the big change since the last time I showed this was, again, the new floor. New floor looks very nice in this space. I'm so happy with the floor, it's not even funny. But the other difference is that we threw in our drapes. Now, I also wanted to record the audio in here because you hear it's still very echoey. I don't know if it's that much better or worse. Well, it can't possibly be worse. The last time I recorded in here, it didn't have any of the drapes, it didn't have this flooring, which is a little bit squishier and spongier than just the plywood underneath. But over time, I'm going to be doing a lot of room treatments to really knock down all of this, this super echoey audio that's in here. I'm probably going to be going with some acoustic paneling for the ceiling that's lightweight, as well as some heavier DIY-based wall panels. I probably will need at least 7 wall panels, and on the ceiling, we're probably going to be using about 96 square feet of these panels made by Orolux, which is kind of like the, it's not the gold standard, but it's like the budget professional standard for this type of foam. On Amazon, you can find a lot less expensive foam than the Orolux brand, but I guess a lot of that stuff is kind of cheaper. It's even lighter weight and more acoustically transparent, which means that they don't really work that well. So I decided just to spend a little bit extra, get the real stuff, but I am interested to see how once we do get the acoustic wall treatment up and installed, how that changes what kind of like echoey reverb that you're hearing here. Because what this is, I believe, is called like a standing wave, and you get that from having a very, very boxy, empty room like the studio. Another thing that's kind of funny about this studio space is I've been telling people for like a long time now that it's a big studio space, it's 1,000 square feet. It is not 1,000 square feet. It's quite a lot larger. We remeasured it, and it's closer to 1,500 square feet, which makes this single studio room roughly the size of my house. Another thing I plan to do up in the ceiling space is pretty much have a lot of the studio infrastructure up there and off the ground. You see that I'm using some temporary studio lighting just on the ground here to provide some lighting. But in the future, I don't want to have kind of like this lighting system on stands taking up floor space. There's a couple of things wrong with using these stands. Even though they're very, very thin, they spread out. So they really occupy like a 3x3 or a 4x4 space on the ground. Also, you're going to have kind of like this wire issue of just like more and more and more wires accumulating like around your feet. And that's really something that I wanted to avoid. So up in the ceiling, we have a number of these outlets. And I want to basically create a truss system up top. So if you can imagine kind of like concert lighting, how they use that aluminum structure up above to hold stuff. And I just want to be clamping all of my studio lights to a truss system up above, have everything plugged in up above, and have it modular so that I can like move the lights around and again, keep the floor space empty. Also, with the truss system, I can set up boom mics and stuff like that. So again, I don't have like a microphone like sitting on my desk or on a stand that kind of like cantilevers over. Like pretty much everything can drop down from the ceiling. Okay guys, I think that pretty much does it for this round of updates. A lot of progress, at the same time a lot of delays. We're hoping that stuff again starts to move forward here, but it's always start and stop with this sort of thing. So my litmus test as to whether or not we've had a good day is if one contractor shows up, just one, any one contractor. If they show up, I'm good. Things can progress slowly as long as something every day gets done. It's seemingly not a lot to hope for, but trust me, like these things just take absolutely forever. So I'm sure that somebody in the comments is going to mention like, hey, all you need to do is withhold payment and they'll show up. If you pay them, they'll never show back up. That might be true, but there's plenty of contractors where we get a bill from them and literally we say, hey guys, we have your check here, come on and get it, and we can talk about some of the next steps here. And one guy, we have a $16,000 check for him, okay? All he has to do is come over and pick it up. And it took him 2 weeks to come and pick up this check. It's unreal. Like, whatever's going on in the construction industry, it's completely bonkers. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this update. If you have any questions, go ahead and toss them in the comments below. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I hope to have a lot for you soon. All right, guys, take care, and happy reefing. Or in this case, happy construction, I guess.